Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 17th of December. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast here at ARIRANG's news centre in Seoul. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The North Korean military pledges its allegiance to leader Kim Jong-un ahead of the second anniversary of his father's death. We bring you a special report on economic reforms that can be expected under Kim's reign. Police storm Korea's railway union offices as part of their investigation into the ongoing rail strike. As the strike enters its 9th day, the state-run railway operator is expected to reduce its high-speed KTX train services by up to 12% starting today. Plus, the United Nations makes its biggest ever appeal for more than $6 billion of humanitarian assistance to civil war-ravaged Syria and its neighbours next year. We begin in North Korea, where the regime is gearing up to mark the second anniversary of the death of former leader Kim Jong-il. On the eve of the occasion, the nation's military held a mass gathering on Monday to pledge allegiance to his son and current leader Kim Jong-un. Connie Kim starts us off.
Is Kim Jong-un trying to quell instability in the north by tightening his grip on the state's military? According to the state-run Korean Central News Agency Monday, the North Korean military swore loyalty to quote-unquote their one and only supreme commander Kim Jong-un and vowed to safeguard him in accordance with Kim Jong-il's last words. The gathering took place at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun in Pyongyang, where bodies of the state founder Kim Il-sung and his son Kim Jong-il lie in state. Military Politburo Chief Choi Dong-hae and Armed Forces Minister Chang Jong-nam were among those in attendance. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un also paid his respects to the late chairman of the Workers' Party Control Commission, Kim Guk-tae, who was known for his loyalty to the regime. The KCNA reporting on Kim Jong-un's visit stressed the importance of doing the same. A large-scale national ceremony to commemorate the second anniversary of Kim Jong-il's death is expected to take place on Tuesday. Much attention is being drawn to how the front seats will be arranged, as it'll be indicative of the regime's new power structure. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Economic reform was high on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's agenda when he first took the reins 2 years ago in the second of our three-part series on Kim's 2 years in power. We look at how far North Korea's economic reforms have come and where they are headed. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
When the young North Korean leader Kim Jong-un assumed power 2 years ago, he made a bold statement to move toward economic reform.
There must be economic development for Kim Jong-un to receive more support from the North Korean public. In that sense, North Korea is attempting economic development that it can achieve by itself, despite all the international sanctions.
One way to do that was to establish 14 special economic zones across 9 regions in the state, opening up the reclusive regime to foreign investors. But because the now executed uncle of the young Kim, Chang Sung-taek, was a key player in the plan along with North Korean Premier Park Bong-ju, experts say Chang's removal may put the brakes on the drive to reform.
Park Bong-ju lost his big partner in the North Korean politics. That means probably the hardliners in Korean Workers' Party and North Korean military authorities, they will raise their pressure against new economic reform and any kind of open-up policy.
Another ambitious project for raking in foreign currency is the construction of the Masikryong ski resort. The park, expected to open for business by the end of this year, is estimated to have cost the ailing state $400 million. But experts are skeptical about Pyongyang's ability to open up due to its constant provocations and nuclear threats.
Such efforts to open up must be backed by an easing of international sanctions and an improvement in North Korea's image to the outside world. It is foolish of the North to think that it can attract foreigners just by building tourist sites.
The recent detainments of American tourists will also work against the North's attempts to attract foreigner tourism. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
Back here in the south, President Park Geunhye convened security meetings with cabinet ministers and senior secretaries on Monday, where she called for a more systematic monitoring to prepare for any changes that might occur in the north. Oh Jin-ju reports.
The recent execution of Chang Song-taek was once regarded as the second most powerful figure in North Korea, startled the world, not to mention South Korea. As a follow-up to an emergency security policy meeting on Friday, the day Chang's execution was announced by Pyongyang state-run media, President Park held a meeting Monday afternoon with her foreign affairs and security-related ministers and senior secretaries. Senior Presidential Secretary for Public Relations Lee Jung-hyun told reporters that President Park ordered the establishment of a National Security Council Secretariat that would support the management of the NSC and the function of the National Security Office to better respond to the rapidly changing situation on the Korean Peninsula and in neighboring nations. The NSC Secretariat played a role as the control tower of security-related issues during the Roh Moo-hyun administration, but was abolished during the Lee Myung-bak administration. She also asked her top government officials to fully prepare for any contingencies and provide assurance to the public so they can continue on with their daily routines without worry. President Park urged related ministries to keep a close eye on the situation unfolding in the north and maintain a strong security posture. In particular, she urged the military to closely cooperate with U.S. forces and share information with neighboring nations and the international community. Earlier in the day, during a meeting with her senior secretaries, President Park warned of a possible provocation.
최근 북한에서 전개되고 있는 일련의 사태를 보면 향후 북한 정세가 어떤 방향으로 진행이 될지 불투명하고 무모한 도발과 같은 돌발 사태도 배제할 수가 없는 상황입니다.
The presidential office of Cheoada and other public offices are currently on emergency standby, with President Park calling for nationwide efforts to prepare for any possibilities, considering what she called the gravity and unpredictability of the status quo. Oh Jin-ju, ARIRANG News.
Russia and China have agreed that the long-stalled six-party talks on denuclearizing North Korea is the optimal format in which to resolve the North's nuclear issue and to engage Pyongyang. Following a meeting between Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Igor Morgulov and China's Chief Nuclear Envoy Wu Dawei in Moscow Monday, the Russian Foreign Ministry said the two sides discussed intensifying joint efforts to resume the talks that were last held in late 2008. The meeting comes after Morgulov held talks with Washington's top nuclear negotiator Glyn Davies in the US early this month. Russia, a member of the six-party talks, which also includes the two Koreas and Japan, has been taking a more active approach to reviving dialogue after it agreed on trilateral business deals involving the two Koreas during President Vladimir Putin's recent visit to Seoul. Days after South Korea's state spy agency announced self-reform measures in response to accusations of political interference, a public hearing was held on Monday by a special parliamentary committee to find ways to overhaul the much-maligned organisation. Park Geunhye reports.
The Special Parliamentary Committee to Reform the National Intelligence Agency held public hearings on Monday. A group of experts was invited to share their views on how to make the agency more politically neutral and strengthen its original mission of information gathering. The experts, however, showed opposing perspectives about the direction and scope of reforms. Experts invited by the ruling Saenuri Party said reducing the agency's budget and investigative functions domestically would have a negative impact on security, considering North Korea still sends their spies to South Korea and the National Intelligence Agency often arrests them. Experts recommended by the main opposition Democratic Party said the NIS should strengthen its information gathering activities on North Korea and other countries, and that its investigative rights at home be limited to ensure it doesn't interfere in domestic political affairs. The two parties also came up with differing opinions about recent developments in North Korea and the role of the state spy agency. The ruling Saenuri party said since the agency did a good job collecting information on the purge of Chang Song-taek, a cautious approach should be taken regarding the scope of reforms.
Now is when the parliament needs bipartisan cooperation. At this important time, both diplomatically and security-wise, we should avoid internal conflicts.
The opposition Democratic Party said reforms should center on improving the agency's information gathering capacity, mainly with regard to North Korea.
The reform ideas by the Democratic Party are intended to strengthen the NIS, not to weaken it.
The National Intelligence Service is embroiled in allegations that it meddled in last year's presidential election. The Special Parliamentary Committee's public hearings will continue through Tuesday. From Wednesday, the committee will begin deliberating on the revision of the law that defines the role of the National Intelligence Service. Park Jiwon, Arirang News.
And turning now to the latest on the nationwide rail strike that is now into its 9th day. Police raided the offices of the state-run rail operators' labour union this Tuesday morning as part of its probe into what it calls an illegal strike. The mass walkout, which had mainly affected freight services until now, has started impacting passenger train services, including subway services in Seoul. Shin Se-min reports.
The police raided the railway union head office at Seoul's Yongsan train station Tuesday morning. Officers took away documents as well as computer hardwares related to the ongoing strike. Around 150 police officers were deployed in case of possible resistance, but they weren't met with any. On Monday evening, arrest warrants for 10 executive members of the nation's railway union were issued. The rail strike that started over 1 week ago has now begun to have a direct effect on commuters in the capital city. The Korea Railroad Corporation, or Korail, reduced operations of Subway Line 3 in Seoul by 15% on Monday. The line is operated by both Korail and Seoul Metro. The union members of Seoul Metro lines 1 through 4 are scheduled to join the strike starting Wednesday. Along with the metro services, Korail said it'll also reduce the number of KTX passenger trains by 12% starting Tuesday, suggesting more inconveniences for commuters in the coming days. And with the lack of trained personnel working on site due to the walkout, a series of safety incidents continue to occur, including one that killed an 84-year-old passenger on Sunday. Striking workers are demanding the government reverse its plan to set up a new rail operator, which they claim is a first step toward privatization. The government and police call it an illegal strike and say they'll follow the letter of the law in dealing with it. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korea's inflationary pressure remains muted as the nation's producer prices, a gauge of future consumer inflation, dropped for the 14th straight month in November. The Bank of Korea said Tuesday that the nation's producer prices slid 0.9% from the same month last year. The drop was led by agricultural products, which fell by over 2%. Oil prices also dropped, with Korea's benchmark Dubai crude falling 1.7% last month. Service prices, however, rose 0.5%. This past summer, the Korean stock market emerged as one of the world's most popular safe havens for investors amid fears over the outlook for US monetary policy. But that upward trend has now been turned on its head in recent weeks, our Yulian reports.
It was less than 2 months ago when Korean stocks enjoyed their longest ever foreign buying spree and hit an 18-month high. That's when heightening fears over the timing of U.S. stimulus tapering sent foreign investors seeking a safe haven to Korea, as they considered it a more solid economy compared to other developing nations. Korea recorded a trade surplus for the 19th straight month in October. But it turns out that was no more than a blip on the radar. In recent weeks, the Kospi had dropped by nearly 5% to a point even lower than the beginning of the year. On top of fears that the United States will most likely start tapering on the near future, experts say Korean companies' disappointing report cards in the third quarter also prompted the foreign sell-off. Of the 254 local companies that announced their earnings in the third quarter, only a third of them posted higher than expected profits. This compares to around two-thirds, both in the United States and Japan.
Ever since the global financial crisis, the United States carried out strong restructuring measures, and Japan lashed out a new set of stimulus policies, so-called Abenomics. Korea instead continued to create a bubble, raising companies' credit rating as they benefited from the strengthening yen.
The lack of strong restructuring measures, he says, has taken a toll on local companies. Pundits are calling for a new and stronger growth engine and appropriate policies to support them so that Korea's stock market can follow a solid upward trajectory. Yuri-an, Arirang News.
A former high-level Samsung Electronics executive has been nominated to head up the nation's second-largest mobile carrier, KT. The company's CEO recommendation committee said Monday that it has tapped Hwang Chang-gyu as the final candidate because of his expertise in telecommunications and his business management skills. The 60-year-old is a semiconductor specialist and is well known for inventing the world's first 256 mega DRAM chip. Hwang will officially be named chairman at a general meeting of stockholders set for mid-January. In international news, the United Nations says it needs a record $6.5 billion for Syria and its neighbors. The world body says the money would help millions of people, many left hungry and homeless by the near 3-year-long civil war in Syria. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The UN's $6.5 billion appeal is the highest ever for a single crisis. The world body says it needs to help an estimated 16 million people in Syria and its neighboring countries, even as last year's ask of $4.4 billion for Syria alone remains unmet. The UN estimates, which coincide with a new study by the International Rescue Committee, say nearly 3/4 of the Syrian population will need humanitarian aid in 2014.
It's a massive number. It's the largest UN aid appeal for refugees ever, and it's necessitated by the fact that the conflict shows no sign of ending. We have some 127,000 refugees fleeing Syria every single month.
The impending winter is a grave concern for aid workers, who say there isn't enough clothing, heating equipment, or fuel to go around. The UN says $2.3 billion is needed to help civilians inside Syria. The rest will be distributed to help Syrian refugees in neighboring countries, such as Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. The report warns many people are at risk of starvation, with bread prices inflating by 500% in some areas. Meanwhile, in Aleppo, dozens of people were killed by barrel bombs dropped by government aircraft. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says 28 children were among the 70 people killed in the attack. Syrian government forces have been accused of purposely targeting hospitals, bakeries, and residential buildings during airstrikes. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
A U.S. federal judge has ruled that the U.S. government's gathering of massive amounts of telephone call data appears to violate the Constitution's protection against unreasonable searches. In his ruling Monday, U.S. District Judge Richard Leon said the National Security Agency relied on almost Orwellian technology that would have been unimaginable a generation ago at the time of a landmark Supreme Court decision on phone records. Leon ruled in favor of 2 Americans who challenged the NSA program and wanted their data removed from NSA records, saying they were likely to prevail under the Fourth Amendment, which is the Constitution's protection against unreasonable search and seizure. The U.S. Justice Department says it is reviewing the ruling. Russia has deployed short-range ballistic missiles that could theoretically hit Poland and Baltic nations in the country's west. Russia's defense ministry says it has stationed short-range 10 Iskander-M missile systems in Kaliningrad, in a Russian enclave between Lithuania and Poland. Moscow says its move doesn't contradict any international agreements or treaties. Media reports say the newly deployed missiles can hit NATO targets located in Poland, Lithuania and even Germany. Russia has long said it would deploy the systems in response to NATO plans to install its missile systems in Eastern Europe. Moscow says NATO aims to encircle Russia, but Washington claims the bases are directed against Iran. Now, Arirang TV, Korea's only global television network, will be available on Direct TV, the largest satellite provider in the United States, beginning in the first half of next year. The Korea Communications Commission said Monday that the new deal will help Hallyu, or the Korean wave, reach mainstream audiences in the United States. Arirang TV becomes the second foreign broadcaster to run programming on Direct TV, following China's CCTV. Arirang launched its first digital terrestrial TV channel in the US in 2011 and reached 100 million households worldwide in 2012.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we kick things off with figure skating. Now, after dominating the Golden Spin of Zagreb a few weekends ago, Kim Jong-un has decided on which event to participate in before heading over to Sochi. Now, on Monday, the 2010 Olympic gold medalist announced that she will prepare for the 2014 Sochi Games by competing at the National Sports Championships, which is set to take place from January 3rd to the 5th. Even with the Four Continents Figure Skating Championships being held at the end of January, Kim felt that it's too close to the Sochi Games and will instead stick with the domestic event to prepare for the Winter Olympics. Meanwhile, it'll also be her last competitive event here in the nation before her retirement. And we move on to the Marine boy Park Geunhye, who competed in the Queensland Swimming Championships. And with the event being his last competition of the season, he was able to finish first in the men's 200-meter event. The 24-year-old was off to a great start, finishing the first 50-meter of the event in 25.43 seconds before finishing the event at 1 minute 47.92 seconds, winning his first gold medal in the 200-meter event. Meanwhile, Park Geunhye plans to compete in several events before the upcoming 2014 Asian Games in Incheon. And moving on with the year 2013 coming to an end real soon, Gallup Korea, the top research firm in Korea, revealed the brightest athlete of 2013. And after asking 1,702 people in Korea ages 13 and up, Ryu Hyun-jin of the LA Dodgers received 51.4% of the vote and came in first place. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un came in second with 35.2% of the vote, and the brightest athlete of 2012, Son Hyun-jae, came in third place this year after receiving 24.9% of the vote. And moving on to baseball, where Chu Shin-soo, who, by the way, came in fifth place with 17%, has yet to find a team for the next season. And while it's coming down to a few teams, all signs are pointing to the slugger heading to Texas. Well, at least according to a recent vote by the fans. Now, it turns out most of the MLB fans voted that Chu Shin-soo will be signing with the Texas Rangers now that all the talks are just about done. And while the fans believe so, ESPN has also predicted that he will most likely sign with the Texas Rangers as well. Now, experts believe that he should be able to receive a 7-year deal worth roughly $120 to $140 million. And finishing things off in Europe with the UEFA Champions League round of 16 drawing out yesterday, Son Heung-min and the Bayer Leverkusen will be facing off with the French powerhouse Paris Saint-Germain. With the nation's eye on Son Heung-min and his success with the German side, the round of 16 will be a tough one, as they're set to face off with PSG, who are currently in first place in Ligue 1. The French side boasts some of the top players in the world, including Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who is considered one of the top strikers in the world. The round of 16 of the UEFA Champions League will not start until February of next year. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
And time now to check in on the weather conditions in Korea and around the world. And that's all from us for now, but you can always catch up with what's been happening on our website, which is arirang.co.kr/news.